All right, everybody. I'm Jean Paul from Space Cowboy Books. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight we're here with Gabriel Hart, author of the new novelette, A Return to Spring. Gabe's going to share a little bit of the book with us, and we're also going to have a Q&A session afterwards. I'll be asking him some questions, but if any of you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them all. In the meantime, while Gabe's reading, I'm going to throw up a link into the chat room of where you can pick up this new novelette. For those of you who don't know Gabriel, Gabriel Hart lives in Morongo Valley in California's high desert. He's the author of the new Palm Springs Riot Noir novelette, A Return to Spring, which we are celebrating the release of tonight, from Madison Press. His dipso-apocalyptic debut novel, Virgins in Reverse / The Intrusion, from Traveling Shoes Press, was released in 2019 with a foreword by avant rockabilly provocateur Tav Falco. Other works have appeared in Pulp Modern, Shotgun Honey, Expat Press, Bristol Noir, Black Hair Press, and Crime Poetry Weekly. He's also a regular contributor to Lit Reactor, Iconoclash Review, and Space Cowboys Simultaneous Times podcast, which we will put a link to in there for you later, as well as the LA Record, a Los Angeles underground music publication. He also taught the writing workshop for Milltree, a nonprofit reach-out program for vets and active duty military to heal the wounds of war. Without further ado, Gabe is going to share an excerpt from the novelette for us. So Gabe, take it away.
Can you hear me? Thank you so much, Jean Paul. So we're going to pick up in the middle of the book. I would say one of the main characters, Vicky, she's working at a bar called Zelda's in downtown Palm Springs, and she kind of gets invaded by some undesirable tourists that have a piece of her on a laptop. Vicky's eyes remained transfixed on a scene she could only wish was a suppressed memory. She approached it like a bad dream, but as the footage rolled on in front of her, it was not only real as day, but brand new, as if it was occurring again for the first time. Evidence. Like a nightmare taking up her whole being, impossible to look away or wake up from. Spring break, 1986. A teeming teenage mob scene on Palm Canyon. There she is at 18 in the back of Eddie Rogers' white Ford pickup, chugging Budweisers with Julie, Rick, and Diana. Eddie's girlfriend, Lena, sat shotgun, targeting passerbys with the stream of a small squirt gun, translucent blue. She hollered something at a wasted guy on the street. He smiled, tilting his head, confused. Squirt, she got him good, right in the eyes. He didn't look happy. He rubbed his eyelids, hollering obscenities because Lena was squirting people with Jose Cuervo, commanding them to open their mouths for their free shot. This guy didn't see what she was throwing down in time, so he got it right in the peepers. Concurrently, other juvenile madness was occurring 3 cars over. A convertible full of Ray-Ban rich kids got a whole industrial bucket full of water poured on them by a snickering twosome, whose friends were filling up another 9, waiting for their intentional misuse. Tequila Eye Guy took note. He ran over, grabbed one, then made his way back to the white pickup for blurry vengeance. Even with the momentum of his run, he let go of the bucket as it flipped into the truck bed, soaking the sudsuckers. They gasped, confused, screaming in skin-blistering anguish. Ignorant of the water being tortuously scalding, he ran back for another bucket to throw, their shrieks only fueling his clenched teeth rage. Lena laughed, realizing what she had done. That flood of water had been meant for her. Eddie saw Tequila Eyes doubling back with another full bucket. He frantically unlocked the driver's side door. He jumped out to meet this impending double dip. He ran to Tequila Eyes, now 5 feet away. Tequila Eyes threw the bucket as Eddie intercepted his face with his fist, a square hit. The other bucket throwers saw their comrade in trouble, as if it was unprovoked. They ran over, snowballing in numbers as they approached, just in time for Vicky to get her own jackhammer punches into the top of Tequila Eye's skull as he tried regaining his balance from Eddie's near knockout. The truck was now surrounded by a disgruntled mob, some jumping into the truck bed. Fists hit flesh while other hands tore bikini strings like spoiled children on Christmas morning. Vicky, Diana, and Lena were now topless, helpless and handless as they covered their exposed chests. Other hands tried removing their crossed arms for a cheap feel while their boys did their best to fight them off. The crowd swelled, rose deep, obscuring the action to anyone not directly involved. But this video camera's view was lined up impeccably to leave nothing to the imagination. Absolute sun-drenched bedlam. A shirtless young man stood out from the melee due to his darker skin and camo shorts. He had a brown pit bull named Oneida on a leash, barking ferociously at the scene. Like renegade security, he parted the crowd with brute strength to get to its nucleus. He saw the whole thing go down. He stroked upstream by pushing bumbling drunks aside. Finally, he approached Tequila Eyes. He had witnessed him tear off Vicky's bikini. Grabbing him by the blonde hair, he paused to get a good look at his face. Reaching into his sheath, he pulled out an antler-handled Bowie knife. In one swift swipe, he stabbed Tequila Eye's cheek, tearing it through to the corner of his mouth. It appeared he was going to take another stab at him the way he raised his arm again, but another hand grabbed his wrist as one of the bucket tossers clocked him across the face. Distracted and dazed, he threw a blow back. They went at it, hand-to-hand combat. Tequila Eyes shrieked on his knees, holding his serrated cheek flap closed the best he could, unaware that fate was still unfolding while the pit bull's master was occupied street fighting the Blue Eyes. Zeroing in on the wounded man, Oneida growled in staggered rhythm with his pitiful moans. The smell and sight of blood triggered its savage biology as it lunged at Tequila Eye's face, sinking his teeth into the cheek wound to finish what his master started. Soon there were only vague traces left of a neck or mouth, though not enough to form another scream. Silence. Finally, a stillness in the asphalt storm. As Oneida licked the cheekbones of their last reserves, Gordon gave up trying to rein in his dog. With the punches unrelenting, it was the mutt or his life. The camera showed him grabbing Vicky by the arm as they ran out of frame, heading behind Palm Springs Art Museum into the steep incline and varicose trails and valleys of Mount San Jacinto. Scene break. "Where the fuck did you get this?" said Vicky, her veneer finally cracking into sobs. "You know we were trapped in San Jacinto for a week? We almost starved to death. That day ruined our fucking lives. It wasn't our fault." "Easy there," Tyler slurred. "I'm not here to punish you or to expose you or your friend there. I just want to get this footage into the right hands is all, and I'm not sure who that is yet. Say, you still in touch with that native dude?" The front door swung open. Gordon stood at the threshold, his right hand on his knife, left hand in a trembling fist. Manny frantically ushered everyone out of the bar past him. Leaning on the door jamb, he stared right at Tyler and Vicky through his long, brown-gray hair, half veiling his pockmarked face. Manny shoved the last person out as Gordon took 2 calm steps forward, locking the door behind him. "So here we got a problem here, Blue Eyes," Gordon said, loud yet cool in his own hybrid accent of Mexican gangster, white trash tweaker, and only a faint trace of his wise native tongue. He continued advancing towards them, not waiting for an answer. "Oh, fuck. Oh, my fuck." Tyler's lips barely moved. "He's got it, Gordon. Spring Break 86. It's all there." Vicky pointed to the laptop, still sobbing. "Oh, yeah? Well, that's a fucking trip through time, huh, homie?" Gordon stared Tyler down. He half circled him, nodding his head in serpentine intimidation. His head went from nods to cool dips, puckering his lips contemplatively as he reached for his knife. "Wait, hold on. What are you doing?" Tyler pleaded, hands guarding the path to his face. In one blurred arc, Gordon drove his antler-handled blade into the keyboard. Tyler hyperventilated. "Fuck, what the fuck? Don't you want to see it? I just wanted to see if I can get into the right hands before..." "He's going to sell it to Desert Sun for $5,000, Gordon. He's here to hustle us for more. Highest bidder, right, you piece of shit?" Tyler stuttered, trying to talk with his hands before giving up to rub his forehead. The laptop screen went bubbly weird. Colors swirled, graying to black out a still of the paused mob scene, as if it couldn't have looked more of a nightmare. Gordon swiftly gripped the handle of the knife, giving it a twist to remove it from the techno wound. Vicky was in deep thought before she blurted out, Wait a sec, so are we a fucking afterthought? Does the paper have the footage already? Tyler put his hands down and looked up at her. I showed them the footage yesterday and they were salivating. I proposed $5,000 with 24 hours to think it over. They said they needed to clear some legalities before they took it. He produced a thumb drive out of the shoulder bag. It's also on here, and it's all yours if you want to purchase it. They have no idea I was going to track you down. Oh, so you're extorting me. Great. I'm merely just trying to get this into the right hands. So you're that deluded that you'd think I'm dumb enough to think you're a hero? Wow, what a valiant stallion you are. She let out an end of the rope growl. There's nothing worse than a criminal who's also a total idiot, but here we are, I guess. She paused, staring off in disbelief. How the hell did you find me here? She said, whipping her head back into the interrogation. Facial recognition software. Me and my buddies work for Lux Riot. We're the leading pioneers of that world, which is why we're in town for that conference, he said, realizing too late that he sounded like a commercial. He cringed, shaking his head at his own superficiality. How'd you get the footage? We'll leave it right there.
All right, Gabriel, thank you for sharing an excerpt from the new novelette. We are going to get into a little bit of question and answer. Please, if anyone in the audience has questions, leave it in the chat room. We'll make sure to get to all of those. First off, Gabriel, I'd like to ask you, this book takes place in Palm Springs, right here in our region. And in a way, it's a extrapolation of what may have happened, almost an alternate history. What made you decide to use the Palm Springs riots of 1986 as a springboard for a crime story such as this one?
It was kind of a synchronized sequence of things, really. I had no idea the Spring Break riots even occurred until the VHS footage was actually unearthed in March of 2018. And yeah, so much in my book, no one had seen the footage of it in 30 years. So yeah, when I saw the footage online, it just blew my brain to bits for multiple reasons. So first, I'm 43, so I tend to be terrified by teenagers anyway, knowing how bad I was when I was a kid, and just considering our world has gotten worse since then. But it was fascinating to see history not just repeating itself, but I get suspended in the amber of time before cell phone cameras and the internet and all that. And of course, it was terrifying because the women were the real victims in the riot. It wasn't like most riots where the focus is on destroying property to make a statement or just over exuberance or whatever. It sounds horrible because it is, but the women actually were the property being destroyed at the Palm Springs riots. The men just thought they were there for their taking. It was crazy. So, and yeah, it immediately made me recall the rapes at Woodstock 90. If you guys remember that, it was during Limp Bizkit's set. I mean, that was, to me, that's still one of the worst and overlooked atrocities pop culture has ever kind of glossed over. But yeah, I couldn't help but wonder why the Palm Springs riots were forgotten about, except for the people that were actually there, since it really changed the whole demographic of the town and ended Palm Springs as a spring break destination as the citizens knew it at the time. So yeah, it turned into an obsession for me. I started asking some of my old desert rat friends like Sean Wheeler what it was like, because I think he saw a lot of it happen. And then I got asked to submit a story to a Palm Springs Noir anthology as sort of one of the last entries. And I wrote something real quick, and time really wasn't on my side for what I wanted to do, for the story I wanted to tell correctly. So it didn't make it into that anthology in time. But luckily, I was able to stretch out my idea into a novelette thanks to Madison Press in Florida, who they know Spring Break well too. And yeah, to speak of, I guess, fear and just Fear, yeah, this is sort of off the subject, but I was talking to this really great horror author last month, Haley Piper, and we were talking about fear, like what makes up fear. And she said something that really stuck with me. She said, like when we're scared, we're not only frightened by its sudden and like unrequested shift in our brains, but it forces us to wonder, what else don't I know? So when I was writing A Return to Spring, it's sort of like an exploration of what else could have happened in that white kid chaos, given the overlooked like diversity of the Coachella Valley.
So in a way, is this book a revenge for the way women were treated during those riots?
I'd say so. Yeah, I kind of created a character to sort of, yeah, to kind of, and symbolically take revenge in a way.
We've got a question from the audience here from Lauren. How much of an influence was Less Than Zero?
Oh, it definitely. You mean on this particular story? It definitely crossed my mind. I think the images of Ray-Banned rich kids and stuff definitely. Yeah, I'm sure that definitely crossed my mind. I love Bret Easton Ellis. Like, I gobble up anything he writes. So yeah, he kind of seeps into my writing a little bit. Sure.
So what draws you to writing in the crime and noir genres? And in light of that, how do you view modern noir in comparison to the traditions and the tropes of the genre?
Ironically enough, it started when I was a teen, where my friends and I were always seeing how much we could get away with, which often led to real bona fide small town crime. And then I was a heavy reader, but one of the first books I ever felt, I guess, seen by was The Black Dahlia by James Ellroy. It had just come out and I devoured it. I just kind of took a chance and devoured it. Not that murdering a woman was like relatable for me, but it made me see the kind of slippery slope of petty crime leading to worse and worse things. So in a way, it kind of gave me the concept of consequence. Like not the getting caught part of consequence, but like the prison of depravity that you could create for yourself if you kind of continue going, because it's like you're always trying to, the thrill, it's like a drug, the thrill just keeps on becoming obsolete and you keep on having to go harder or whatever. So noir has always just sat really comfortable with me since I was a teenager, just I guess showing how it could always be worse, how it could always get worse. And somehow that I always saw that darkness as like a positive influence on me, as strange as that sounds. And you mentioned modern noir. Modern noir is getting like really diverse. It's definitely no longer like a white boys club like it's been known for. Therefore, the perspectives are just getting blown wide open, and its possibilities less limited. And like writers are, I think, a lot more conscious of avoiding tired tropes and stuff like that. Like for example, two noir novels that made two of the biggest splashes in the last year happened to be written by a Korean woman and a Black dude. There was Your House Will Pay by Steph Cha, and then Blacktop Wasteland by S.A. Cosby. So I feel like we're seeing a lot more like thematically, like a lot more race relations and class issues, especially from like British noir, like it's always taking places in like the tenements and stuff. And thematically also like the cycles of abuse being tackled by the crime fiction community, and I'd say the horror community as well. And it's cool. It's as if we're finally like getting to the bottom of what makes evil tick by those who are most often affected by it, I guess.
So you've published a lot this year, and you've written in many genres, not just noir and crime. For instance, you've written quite a bit of science fiction for my podcast, Simultaneous Times. What differences and similarities have you encountered from one genre to the next, and what strengths are you finding in genre fiction?
I personally prefer when genres overlap, when the rigidity of those expectations are challenged. So yeah, I think when I write sci-fi, I definitely pour from my kind of noir heart. So it kind of maybe comes across more in like the general attitude and atmosphere. Like maybe it's like choppier, less mystified dialogue. But yeah, I actually don't consider myself a practitioner of like one single genre. Like I write stuff that could be considered horror as well, and then there's a lot of stuff that I write that's often too like transgressive to fit into any kind of genre fiction. Since genre fiction adheres to kind of the hero's journey pretty often. So I often feel most comfortable outside of that, even if it's like at the expense of the reader wanting something easy to get through or whatever.
And we have a question from the audience here. This is from Vern. I'm going to paraphrase this question just for time's sake. But novelettes tend to be an unusual length for a book, and not particularly popular since the magazine eras are over. How do you deal with length, novelette versus novella versus novel, and how do you know when to stop?
Yeah, is that from Vern? Yeah, Vern hit me up earlier today. He, yeah, I think this was kind of an experiment. Like I think Madison Press kind of has the market currently cornered on these cool mini books. So yeah, it was. I mean, I guess this could have. It was written to appear in an anthology with other short stories. So yeah, part of me thought it was an experiment, like economically, you know, like I was actually asking a lot of people that bought the book, like, would you have rather have seen this in an anthology, paid for it in an anthology with a bunch of other short stories, or were you stoked on the single format? And unanimously, everyone was kind of really stoked on the small kind of pocket-sized format. Just it just seemed real. I was gonna say it seemed real novel, but that wouldn't be good. There is like a novelty in it though. But yeah, Vern, to answer your question, I think, yeah, I would never, unless I was like under contract with a publisher, I would never try to, if I felt like a story was a good enough length, I wouldn't try to shy away from a novelette. I think this, you know, this is, the book's actually sold really, like it's already overperformed my twin novel for the first month. So yeah, I think it's kind of cool to see people jazzed on a not often read format. So yeah, if your story's good at 13,000 words, and I'd say, yeah, keep it. Why push it? A lot of editors are gonna tell you to cut stuff anyway, you know.
So, Gabriel, this is your second book. We've got the first book here, Virgins in Reverse / The Intrusion, twin novellas. There's a link to find that book in the chat room there. What I'm curious about is how has your style changed since your debut, and how do you feel like you've grown as a writer? What's changed from book one to book two?
Shit. I mean, Virgins in Reverse took, I mean, that from when I started it to when it was released, it was almost 10 years. I mean, it was just so many learning curves, and I absolutely stand by the book, but yeah, I think it's hard to compare the two. But I will say the main difference between the two books, that I guess even though Return to Spring is based on a historical event, it's my first release of pure fiction, as opposed to Virgins in Reverse Intrusion, which I guess had a lot of me in it, taken to illogical extremes. A Return to Spring has three characters I kind of based on local archetypes I've witnessed, like not necessarily known in the desert, but just people I've observed. And so I really had to use a different part of my imagination and research to kind of extrapolate, yet not overdo it, because since I have the tendency to overdo things, it was a nice little challenge that I hope gave me further discipline to kind of step outside of myself.
All right, we've got another question from the audience here. This one is from Anthony. Hi, Anthony. It's been a long time. Do you find yourself holding back on those out of genre, more obscure ideas, or do you follow them through in some way or another?
I always follow them through. There's always, I feel like you're always going to have an audience. Like some of my really kind of hard like pieces that I've been submitting a lot of short stories and Flash this year, and a lot of my short stories that were rejected by kind of very staunch genre fiction publishers. Like for example, three of them in a row got picked up by Expat Press, who have turned out to be like one of my favorite publishers around. They're more experimental, really transgressive, kind of anything goes, but not you know, they're not about shock value or anything. They're a lot more studied than that. So yeah, I feel like you're always going to find an audience. You just have to find your niche. And if something doesn't work for, you know, if you find yourself beating a piece against the wall, yeah, you just look somewhere else. There's so much out there. It's kind of reassuring how much is out there. And yeah, there's definitely something for everyone, I would say.
And out of curiosity for me, you mentioned Expat Press. Do you think this kind of modern, more crass attitude is an extension of, or trying to fill the shoes of Adam Parfrey, for instance, and what Feral House used to do?
No, I think they're two totally different things. Yeah, I would say they're two totally different things. It's I don't think anyone would ever fill Parfrey's shoes. I mean, people definitely have picked up the torch, but yeah, that's like that. Those are really hard shoes to fill. And I wouldn't even kind of compare those two entities either.
I'm kind of only equating them in perhaps the way that the audience responds to the material.
Yeah.
But we have another question here from Curtis. Do you have any plans or ideas of exploring the characters from A Return to Spring in future works?
I had no plans to, but I've gotten a lot of people asking me that. Like, I didn't think it seemed kind of like a resolute ending to me, but everyone seems to think it was like a cliffhanger. I definitely didn't write it like that, but I've definitely been yeah, kind of negotiating the idea in my head, and yeah, it's been a cool response. Like, people, you know, every once in a while start thinking like what Gordon, you know, what actually would happen if Gordon reunited with his family and to Vicky and all that. The character, it's funny, the character Vicky, just a side note, like the name Vicky, I had never met anyone named Vicky until I moved to the desert. And there's Vickies everywhere here. for whatever reason, it's funny how like names are like tend to be regional like that. And it's almost all the Vickies I met, they're almost always the same type of like cool older desert rat chick. Like it's usually like a blonde and kind of just, they've kind of been through it, you know, like, so I kind of based Vicky off of like, yeah, just a kind of mixture of all those Vickies I met.
So back to writing crime fiction. I write science fiction, and one of the reasons that I do is because I really enjoy thinking about the future. When I think about a genre like crime, I have to ask the question, what thought processes that go on within you make you want to write about crime?
You said you like thinking about the future. That's why you like writing sci-fi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting because in crime and noir, the characters often don't want to think about the future, either because they're inherently doomed by circumstance and have to pick up after other people's bad decisions. Often the protagonists own rock and a hard place where in order to determine if there will be a future, it often comes down to a split-second decision of having to kind of shit or get off the pot. In fact, I'd say the protagonists are often trying to avoid an outcome, like they're actually trying to escape the future, like the near future. Like denial is often a really comfortable place for noir and crime characters, and in turn like a really fertile playground for the author, I think.
So how do you, if you don't mind expanding upon that a little bit, how do you relate to that or see yourself in that, or find that you need to express yourself in that way?
Oh, I've worked out like very personal things through plots of my writing. Like I mentioned denial. I mean, that's like, yeah, anyone who's been in and out of therapy can, it's a very easy place to get trapped in, and you have no idea you're there. It's like you kind of just get used to kind of building walls around yourself, and so yeah, I like every time I try to not put myself in in one of my books, it's kind of inevitable that it just happens anyway. I'm sure there's some parts of me in A Return to Spring that I don't realize that they're there.
And it sounds as though the way you're describing crime fiction, and the audience forgive me, I'm not particularly familiar with crime fiction. It sounds like there's an inherent pessimism in the genre. Yeah. Do you find that to be true? And if so, is there a place for optimism in noir and crime?
Yeah, I think, well, it's pretty much defined by pessimism, from just kind of bleak surroundings, a bleak outlook, a very like realist stance. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I'm trying to think if I've read, yeah, there's noirs with happy endings. But they're very rare, so it's hard for me to think of any offhand. Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like noir and crime fiction. When it gets resolved at the end, it gets resolved in an unresolved way. Like that's kind of the only way I can really put it. Like you're kind of left with this feeling of kind of disintegrate. Like stuff kind of disintegrates more than gets cinched up.
So that being said, what are some of your favorite authors in the modern crime literature scene?
I mentioned Steph Chaw and S.A. Cosby earlier. Those were two of my favorite books that came out in this last year. Again, Steph Chaw's Your House Will Pay and S.A. Cosby's Blacktop Wasteland. I'd have to add Don Winslow immediately to that. He's got like the highest profile out of, I think, anyone, and still manages to be increasingly relevant considering how long he's been at it. Gabino Iglesias would be another. He's kind of fleshed out this really cool, this kind of hybrid corner with what he calls barrio noir. So he takes like crime and noir and mixes it with actually horror and like Santeria elements. Like he'll do kind of like cartel stuff and mix it with like Santeria. It's really, really, really cool. And then there's my friend Steve J. Golds, who he was virtually unknown last year, but he's been so prolific with quality stuff this year that he's just blowing everyone's mind. I got to beta read his second novel. His first one just came out in October, and he already has another one coming out in January. And that one, Always the Dead, I just can't stop thinking about it. Like he's like relentlessly old school, but he's also like nothing I've ever read before. It's just devastating, heartbreaking stuff.
All right, we've got another question from the audience. This one's from Ryan. Hello, Ryan. Does your writing process take away or give you energy? And has that process changed since your first book?
Oh, that's a good question. It's, I guess I could relate it to, since I'm a musician as well, it's a better use of my energy, I guess. Like I could feel more of my energy kind of paying off as I write. And yeah, I think that, and with that, there's a momentum as I go. I don't think I've ever gotten like burnt out from writing. I'm kind of one of those guys that I'm flogging myself if I go a day without writing. That's just my own neuroses. I don't recommend anyone being like that, because I don't think it might be ambitious, but it's not entirely healthy. You got to remember to like go outside every once in a while and check in on your friends and stuff. But yeah, I think it's changed. It's gotten more structured since my first book. Like, I think my first book was such a tortured process, and writing to me now is like a lot of fun. And it's, I feel like, you know, it's like one of the only times I feel like comfortable in my body in a way, you know, or like that feeling that I'm doing like exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. So, and it's been, the pandemic's like, of course, been affecting everyone so differently this year, but I kind of really lucked out because I got taken out of work in March with a shoulder injury. And so I've been like living off of workers' comp and recovering from shoulder surgery. And it's been just dreamy. Like, I've just been getting to write, you know, I almost feel guilty because it's just been, I hope there's some way I could just keep this going somehow. But we'll see what happens in spring. We'll see what happens when I return to spring, when my shoulders all recovered.
And may that happen soon. And I wanted to ask, since you took an event from our actual history, when writing about actual events and locations, what do you take from that environment, and what do you leave out, and how do you go about making the decisions in that process?
Let's see, like Zelda's, the bar in Return to Spring, that's a real place that actually, it shut down. It was sort of this really happening spot, like top 40 place, and then the gangsters took it over, and then it became a whole other kind of hot spot. But I thought that was a real cool like headquarters for the plot. And I think, yeah, every place in Return to Spring, I think, is real. I mean, I know those streets really well because I worked down in Coachella Valley and stuff. I think a big motive for writing Return to Spring was to kind of raise the visibility of the riots as part of the city's history. But I think for whatever reason, I did less research about the riots themselves and more about, I guess, the types of people I was basing the characters off of. Because, excuse me, I think there's something so deliberate about a mob behaving badly. Like, it's breathtaking. Like, it reveals something so frightening about human nature, that I wanted to just make sure I put that in people's face first and foremost. And yeah, when I saw that footage, it just totally captured my imagination. And yeah, the story just kind of started unfolding beyond my control. But as far as the facts, like, yeah, they were all there. I didn't really have to do much digging, which once again is so strange why it's such an overlooked event. But yeah, I know that whole area well, so it's a lot of the geography was already upstairs.
Do you ever find when fictionalizing something like this, especially something so steeped in violence, that there's subjects, locations, people where it would be, an interference or interfering with something sacred to put them in the fiction?
Can you repeat that one more time, John Paul?
Yeah. When writing about reality, do you think there's anything sacred that's off limits to the writer? Particularly when talking about a story as violent as this book.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, I created the whole incident. Yeah, there wasn't any reports of what I actually wrote about happening in the riots. And yeah, I think it can get into dangerous territory when certain people's personal lives were affected by it. But I still kind of felt the need to kind of just raise the visibility of it, because I think it was a really important event, and it kind of told it was really telling with what happened to the city.
We've got a question from the audience here from Stephanie. Your writing is incredibly descriptive and illustrative. Have you ever considered translating your stories into visual medium, i.e. making a short film?
Oh yeah, I think about that all the time. I wrote a couple scripts for this guy, DeKale, over spring. So yeah, I kind of got my first taste of that. But yeah, I think about that all the time. I wish I had the know-how to get behind a camera. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think about that all the time. It's frustrating how much I think about it, because I'm a big cinephile and stuff. So yeah, I spent a lot of time kind of daydreaming about that, and what I would do and what kind of movie I would make and stuff. But yeah, I also want to be careful not to be that guy that just tries to do everything and doesn't master any of them, so it's, at the same time, I kind of like to leave that to the experts. But yeah, I'm always open for collaboration.
And last year, you worked with the local nonprofit here up in Joshua Tree, Milltree, teaching workshops for military veterans. What was this experience like, and what was your biggest takeaway from your students?
It was nothing like I expected, but it was better than I anticipated. I think I I think I had a preconception that it was going to be some kind of like group exorcism I was going to help facilitate through writing, but I soon found out that was one of the last thing a vet wants to write about is war. I wouldn't have been qualified to do that anyway. But what we did do is exchange just very simple stories about everyday life, like some pieces more uncomfortable than others, but I was telling everyone I feel like I learned more from them than they learned from me. I mean, I was just facilitating a round table writing session. I wasn't really teaching them much. I was just kind of the guy. I think it was important that I did it, but yeah, I don't want to. I want to be careful not to over amp what I did. As cool as an experience it was, I was just the guy at the head of the table saying, write this. And but what was actually really cool is yeah, like I said, I felt like I learned more from them than they learned from me. Like, they knew how to express themselves pen to paper. And what was really cool is I think their backgrounds gave them a lot more courage to give and receive critique than your typical writer. Like that was a really cool thing to witness.
And shifting gears slightly, how did you come to work with Madison Press, and can you share a little bit about the experience with your new publisher?
Yeah, so back in May, I think it was, Yeah, back in May, Madison published this really great anthology called Little Boy Lost. It was a companion anthology to one they released the fall before called Little Girl Lost. So it's these short stories about loss of innocence, basically. And yeah, I was just on a submission frenzy this year, and they were one of the first people that picked up one of my stories. They took, for Little Boy Lost, they took this short story of mine called Wrathchild's Atrophy, which is basically like Stand By Me, but with Midwest heavy metal kids. So yeah, luckily Madison asked me for another dance after I sent them this one. They had their mini book. They were taking submissions for these cool mini books, and that was that. I'm really grateful that I was able to find a home for the story.
We've got a few more audience questions here. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but do you find that there are autobiographical traces in your work? And then I would like to add to that question, by the way, this is from Zara. I would like to add to that question, when interjecting autobiographical situations, how do you retain the fiction of the fiction?
That's such a good question. I mean, I have kind of memory issues, and the way, I mean, I not memory issues, like I have a bad memory, but the way I remember things is, I know it's not exactly how it happened. Like it's romantic. It's a lot more romantic than probably how it happened, for better or worse. So like when I was done with, like, if you asked me what was true and what was autobiographical and what wasn't in Virgins in Reverse and Intrusion, I couldn't even tell you. And I'm not trying to be like Mr. Mysterious or like with that, but yeah, there's so many bizarre just blurring of lines between the two, and like you and I talked about before, stuff that actually became nonfiction after I wrote it, like stuff that, I mean, and I'm actually working on this project, if anyone out there is interested, where I kind of want to get a bunch of input with writers who have written fiction completely divorced from the real life, and then it kind of came true. The more I talk to people, the more I'm finding that it's a really common thing. I think in any kind of art, we're going to learn that time is non-linear. So I really want to explore that. If you go to gabrielhart.net, you could see, and you go down the news post into, I think it was like spring of this year, you'll find my submission call for that. But yeah, I kind of want to start pursuing that a little more. Yeah, it's tough. I think the older you get, the more blurry those lines get. And I think it's romance. It's romanticizing your past. Because what I say this all the time, but what is, when you romanticize something, you kind of make a bigger deal of it than it is, in a way. But I think that's sort of just the way we get through life.
And here's another question from the audience. This one again is from Ryan. What kind of demands do you have for the reader, if any?
Oh, demands? Oh God, that's such a good question. I guess just to kind of leave their expectations at the door. Maybe not. God, I don't demand much. I guess just other than just undivided attention. Yeah, I demand I demand silence from the reader, really, so they could soak it up.
So
I demand the reader to demand silence.
Gabriel's next book is not a choose your own adventure. Spoiler. And another question that occurred to me when we were talking, I kind of forgot about this, having been a few weeks since I read the new novelette, but there's an appearance of a dog in the book, and I've noticed that in this year, I know I've published some dogs in fiction has become kind of a thing for you. I know you said you don't want to become the dog writer, and you've certainly done enough writing that doesn't have dogs. But can you tell us a little bit about how that's come to be, and
Yeah, I mean,
and more importantly, perhaps in this question, about writing non-human characters?
it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I just wrote another dog story. I'm waiting to hear back from this submission from actually Gabino Iglesias. I'm like really crossing my fingers. But yeah, I don't know. I think by the second or third time I'm all fuck, I'm the dog guy. But it's such fertile ground. I mean, my dog Jackie, he's kind of become like a local celebrity. I mean, like when we used to go out, I mean, he never leaves my side. So yeah, his brain has just kind of seeped into mine, and I just wonder, there's so much there's just so much wonder at play when you look at a dog. Like, you have no idea what his or her life was like before you rescued that thing. And it's just, I spend a lot of time just thinking about dogs. I think they're really symbolic of a lot of our human traits. And yeah, they're heartbreakers. They're just really streamlined heartbreakers.
We all know Gabriel loves a good heartbreak, right? Any of us that are familiar with his music. And all right, it's almost been an hour now. I just want to ask to top this whole thing off, unless there's any more audience questions, what's coming up next for you? What have you been writing lately? What themes are you taking on? And what can we expect from you in 2021?
So right now I'm working on my entry for this this really cool crime fiction anthology based on the Ramones. So basically we're all picking one of their song titles and just taking off down a dark alley with them. And those song titles are like perfect for this. It's something that's been going on in the crime fiction community. Like there was a really great one with the Go-Go's. There was a really great one with Bruce Springsteen. And yeah, I got looped into submitting early for this Ramones thing, and I'm doing the KKK took my baby away, so it's obviously going to be really intense. I'm almost kind of scared of it. But other than that, in April, I'll have my first poetry book out by this British publisher called Close to the Bone, and I've got my friend Steve J. Golds to thank for that, the guy who I mentioned earlier. I'll have a story up on Bristol Noir in the next week or so, and then I'm going to have a story in their upcoming anthology next year. They've been a really great outlet for me. And then on Christmas Eve, Expat Press will be posting a piece of erotica from me called Flesh in the Material World. So I'm hoping that will inspire maybe a different kind of holiday spirit for everyone.
All right, Gabriel. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us from your new novelette, A Return to Spring. For anyone interested, I just threw the link in the chat for where you can get that book. And yeah, thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the compelling questions. And definitely check out this new novelette by Gabriel from Madison Press, as well as his debut novel, Virgins in Reverse / The Intrusion. Thank you, Gabriel. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you, folks. Thank you, Jean-Paul.